Okay, well, welcome today. We're going to be talking about social media curation. It's a topic that's very dear to my heart, as I mentioned. This slide's going to come around again. I skip slides, I add slides, but I wouldn't advise you following along, but if you really need to, it's tinyurl.com/curationq. But wait on that. All right, I think I'll start with a musical. That's just the overture. So we're talking about curation, specifically social media curation, and I want to put it in the context of why it might be needed in our schools. It's my opinion that this is really what's going to drive any kind of mobile effort and really any flipped or blended classroom. The librarian plays a role, but I'm going to skip that one for right now because we're not all librarians. But I think for all of us as educators, it's the perfect time to contribute, model, and lead as curators. I'm going to make 3 or 4 arguments, maybe 5 or 6, I can't remember. But the first argument is that curation is search. And I think that if you are advising your students to just search Google, or if you yourself are just searching Google, first of all, there's a million search tools out there, but I can go on and on about for a long time, but I'm not going to do that today. But I also just want to suggest that curation is not just a way to gather things, it's a way to search for things. And so when I had a library, last time I did, right front and center on my search page for my students were curation sites that I asked them to search. And so this is important for a couple of reasons. People who curate are experts, they're passionate, they're hobbyists, they know something about the stuff that they are bothering to curate for. So one example of this is the LibGuides community, and it's a real hidden secret. Only librarians know about it, and not all librarians know about it, but it is a platform where librarians build curation. And so my example here was an autism search. And when I did my search here on autism, I found curation on autism from medical libraries, from psychological libraries, from schools of education, from all over the place. And these people are pointing the people who need to find information on autism to the very best resources, to the very best curation efforts, to the very best journals, to the very best organizations, to the very best support groups. And so this is really a kind of hidden secret. Similarly, if you search Scoop It, and what I'm saying here is you don't have to curate in all these platforms, and you don't have to search in all these platforms, but be aware of them. So if you were to search Scoop It, what you're going to get here is current awareness. You're going to get the news for the autism community, and I see a lot of people leaving. This is going to get way more fun. But anyway, if you search here, you get journals and organizations getting the current news, taking it from newspapers, magazines, all sorts of news sources, and pushing it out to a community of people who need that news. So that's Scoop It. And Scoop It makes little magazines for you. Paperly makes little newspapers for you. And these are kind of vetted. So the best and the most popular and the most frequently updated paperlies get pushed to the top, and you can see how frequently they're updated, and sometimes they give them little gold stars. So these are also good for search. Second argument, curation is a learning activity. Curation.
My 3-ring binder really held all my school stuff. I know by now that binder can't contain my research. The student, curation, the student, curation.
Pierre Levy, who is an expert on collective intelligence, was interviewed by Howard Rangold. And Levy was sharing that everybody needs to behave like a librarian. Everybody needs to curate because it is a new skill. What he said was he was talking about students, all young people, learning to be something for which we do not have a word, a knowledge citizen or a citizen of a knowledge society. And I love that phrase. And I think when students begin to curate on their own, when they begin to find information on a regular basis for the stuff for which they have passion, they behave like knowledge citizens. So the ways I think curation connects to learning is it's a way, number one, to maximize the OER resources that we're getting. Students develop digital literacies that are not on the test. They learn to detect crap. They learn to determine relevance. They learn to take a lead in an area of niche interest. They learn to search without Google and learning that Google is not always the answer. They take responsibility for their own learning, and they get the idea that kids can be trusted guides as well as adults. I believe that curation also forms community. All right, one more. I won't play too many more, I promise. Are you okay with this? You like that?
We rely on for creative stuff. What's best so we avoid the fluff. And who must point the way to stuff that's good enough, so we don't miss the stuff that's really buff. The network. Curation. The network.
So it's about the network, and I'm going to tell you a network story. I had a friend, Nikki, who had a brain tumor about 4 years ago. And I was doing a little illegal work, black market work. The community that Nikki was caring about and was a member of herself, the information that they needed, it was a life and death decision being able to get this kind of information. They needed information on new drugs, clinical trials, doctors who were doing innovative work. So she would hand me article citations that she found, and I would go into Elsevier and all of the firewall journals. They know about this, so it's not a secret. And I would send them to her outside of library networks. And then she would farm those articles out to the patients who needed them. And it seemed to me to be incredibly unfair that people for whom information was a life and death situation couldn't get to the journal articles that they needed. So let's move ahead a year or so, and at Nikki's funeral, this guy Jeff came up to me, and he said, "Joyce, thank you for what you were doing. These articles were really important for us, and we needed to have access to them. But you know what? I was helping too." He said he was curating the news for the brain tumor community using this paperly. He became a leader as a husband of a brain tumor patient, and a community formed around this news and Jeff's work. And it was much more important for them to get the current awareness news than for them to go into a database and search this all the time. Jeff was an important curator for that community. So it's also about leadership. When my students curated for their final project as seniors, they chose a topic that was of great importance to them, computer security. I had a student who wrote a code that would help people remember their passwords. Tenzin was curating in Tibetan for the Free Tibet movement, and people were reading her stuff. I had one student who decided he wanted to be a real estate photographer. He was curating the best of real estate photography and sharing it with the professional real estate photography community. This was stuff they took a lead in, and it wasn't all that much work, but people got to know their names in those specific communities. And so I think it can form, it helps you find your personal brand and helps you develop leadership. For many of us who are teachers and librarians, it also scales our practice. This is my graduate class, and the work that I'm doing with this particular graduate class can be read by any graduate class that's taking that course. But if I were to put up one book on my LibGuides, one reference book, where one kid could read it at a time, ordinarily, I'm embedding a book, an ebook, that can be read by hundreds of students at the same time. My instructional voice is also spread by that because all of my lessons are curated on these guides. It's also important for personal knowledge management. Howard Jarkey is a Canadian, I don't think he is a scholar, but he's created a model for what we're doing when we're curating for ourselves. We're filtering, we're validating, we're synthesizing, we're presenting, we're customizing, and then we're sharing in a social way. What we're doing when we're curating is creating dashboards for students, and there's a whole bunch of different ways you can do that. In terms of personal knowledge management, it's also very important for you to be able to do this. I have the kind of the most lame Hurricane Sandy story. So when Hurricane Sandy hit the East Coast, my husband was a kind of pioneer kind of guy, and he didn't want to go to a hotel. We had no hot water, we had no heat, it was terrible. So for 2 weeks we were just there, and my hair got all matty. Girls with curly hair would understand this. And so I got a haircut because my hair was terrible. But I didn't have curated hairstyles ready, right? So I got a bad haircut, and I'm still recovering from it. And I know this is a sappy story because Hurricane Sandy, I know you hate me for this, Hurricane Sandy was certainly tragic, and my hair is not a big issue. But it occurred to me that every hairstylist in America, in fact, every hairstylist in the world, should have an iPad which curates their best cuts, their best colors, and everything else. So I could see what they could do and what they could not do, and I could choose the hair I wanted. So I think, I'm not making my case, I can see by your faces. But I think there is a case for everybody curating in his or her own profession. So let's get started, and I'll share some of my favorite tools for my favorite tasks. First, just to get a sense of what the difference between gathering things together is, which is what we call aggregation, from this sort of approach called collection, which is very neat, but you can't fit an RSS feed on these shelves, and you can't fit real streaming videos on them either. So we're curating. This is a bundler, which is a curation effort itself, that collects definitions of curation, a bit meta. But take a look at that on your own. But my definition has a lot to do with this guy. This is Dr. Barnes. Anybody been to the Barnes Museum in Philadelphia? A couple of you. It's a different kind of museum. In fact, it's a learning place. It's a school. And as you can see in that picture, what Dr. Barnes did was he collected the great art from all over the world and put it on a wall. And what he did when he was doing that was not creating a one-wall kind of image of the Mona Lisa behind theater rope and a light. He was creating context. He put a Van Gogh next to a Manet, next to a Renoir, just so that the viewer could look at the shape of a woman's body or the color yellow. So the contextual juxtaposition of the paintings that Barnes did was the most important thing. He was a curator. We have a lot to curate. We have all that OER stuff in that Go Open initiative that's coming down the road. We have all of these digital collections and so much more. This is what's coming down the road in terms of Go Open. Have you been following this? I want you to know that every major publisher vendor is going to be flooding us with Go Open material, and each one of them wants to be the silo for that material. Microsoft is going to be a silo for some of it. I'm sorry. Yeah, Microsoft it's going to happen through docs.com. But the biggest one is Amazon. I'm going to be meeting with some of those people later today. Amazon is creating a marketplace for OER, and it is going to look just like Amazon with all the filters and facets, and people will be able to search it. But it's going to be huge, and I think what we need to do for our own communities is to grab that stuff. Somebody's got to be the scout. Somebody's got to be the person who grabs that stuff and organizes it and has it make sense for our local users. So this is the homepage for the Go Open community. I want you to take a look at it and keep an eye on it. And we're also curating all sorts of stuff. So we're not just curating content. We're curating tools, and we're curating student work, and we're curating all sorts of strategies for use in the classroom. We're also curating instruction. And I want to skip to get to some of the more practical stuff. We're making sense of information. So let's talk more about the tools. And when I think about the tools, I think about their affordances and constraints. I think sometimes about the Sammer model in terms of when we use something, is it just substitution or is it truly redefinition? This is a model I'll be talking about tomorrow at the App Smashing workshop, and this is when Shannon and Miller and I were thinking about there are tools for synthesizing, making, and housing and hosting. And these are some of the tools that we have for curating. So when you're doing this, if you're doing this seriously, I want you to think about this as not just needing one tool. First, you need a parking lot. Can somebody, does anybody understand this metaphor early on? My parking lot was LibGuides, and into it, I parked all sorts of stuff. So it's possible your parking lot is what? A website, perhaps Google Sites. What else might it be? It could be a wiki, absolutely. So think about what your parking lot is and then what you're going to drive into it. That animation didn't work outside of PowerPoint. Also think about the buckets I'm going to describe as rather porous. There's no perfect structure or model for this, but I'm trying to make some sense, create a schema for thinking. First thing is current awareness. So for tools that have to do with current awareness, we're looking at tools that unglue the newspaper and take apart the LP album. So it's not that many of us read a full newspaper cover to cover anymore, but we're pulling out of it what our community needs and pasting it together from a bunch of different newspapers. And so among the things that allow us to do that is if when you're looking for current awareness, what you need is a tool like Scoop It. These are my scoops. So every time I wake up in the morning, I am faced with the decision of what to scoop and what to trash. And so I curate in the area of curation, virtual school libraries, search tools, and information fluency. And every morning, because of what I set up under the hood, stuff comes in because of my search words, because of where I told those little robots to go. It pulls in stuff, and I can just add stuff to my magazines. This is what it looks like under the hood. And as you can see, I'm pulling from RSS feeds, from Twitter users, from Twitter lists, from Twitter searches, from Facebook, from YouTube. So this is making a pretty media-rich magazine for me. And you can teach kids to do this. This is what Paperly looks like. And it doesn't have to be for a serious professional topic. It can be for Game of Thrones. And the last one I think I have here is Flipboard. What I did with Flipboard is I worked with the science teachers, and the science teachers wanted a magazine every day on the environment. And so what I had to do was go to National Geographic, to Science Magazine, and it pulled together the magazine that my science teachers needed. These are some examples of Flipboard magazines. This one's on human trafficking. This is really rich, and it keeps refreshing. And you can grab the embed code and put it on any teacher's website. And I lied. Feedly is another way. So if this replaces Google Reader. So if you follow blogs, all you need to do is look at one page. You set up all the blogs to come to Feedly, and then you have a list of all the blogs that you care about. Do you have to read them every day? Nope. You just know that they're all in one place. As I said, as a student sang in that song, the 3-ring notebook is no longer adequate to contain their research. What we need to do is give them strategies by presenting dashboards of the things that they need and also helping them to create their own dashboards. And so I think of them as palettes or dashboards. This is an article about the various different tools you could use. But one of my favorites, how many Edge Shelf users are there? A few? This is a really brilliant tool. I don't know if I take time to do this, I may not finish, but what it does is it allows you to create collections. And so if you could read that, you'd see I have my curation tools, my digital storytelling tools, my avatar making tools. Everything is in a neat collection. And this not only allows you to gather the stuff, but there's a review, a video, teacher comments, QR codes. All this stuff is available from EdShelf, and you set up these little collections. This one is very new, and the Participate people are here on the floor. Has anybody tried Participate? You're going to love this. This also allows you to make little collections, and the collections are, I'm not going to go show you right now because it's not going to work, but the collections I don't think there's a picture of that here, but this is the review. It also does reviews, and it also allows you to create collections. And one other amazing thing that it does is it also connects to Twitter chats. So it allows you to search all of the educational Twitter chats to find the one that you want. It allows you to set up a time frame. And from the Twitter chat, you don't need to do this, but from the Twitter chat, anything that was tweeted in the course of the period that you've specified gets set up in a collection automatically. So you can kind of collect everything in a pretty collection that the people in TL chat or Ed chat or SS chat or Math chat are pulling together. This is a picture of my Ed shelves, out of order, and then this is graphite. Another really great place for you to search for apps, get reviews, and also in this space you form boards. And you can keep your boards together in graphite. It's by Common Sense Media. The other thing that Common Sense Media allows you to do is to create lesson flows. How many of you have done those? So if you're curating for an instructional unit, it puts the 5 parts of a traditional lesson together and allows you to scooch in the various different apps and tools that you're using along with your instructional content. When you print that out for an administrator, you've got a pretty rich lesson. Somebody said, wow, finally, yay. It's really cool. So this is, I'll show this in more detail tomorrow, but you can see that's an example of the featured lessons. And along the top, I think that's, one of them is the history of Starbucks. It's an economics lesson. But you can see they've used Kahoot to kind of make people aware of former knowledge, and they've got dictionaries in there, and they've got all sorts of stuff. So every app that you need is curated directly for that instructional unit. And you can borrow other people's curations. This is a closer look at what lesson flows are. Another genre of curation is called the learning playlist. How many of you make learning playlists? Okay. What's your favorite tool for learning playlists? I don't want to put you on the spot. I might mention it. Yeah? What's it called? Okay, good. I don't have those. So let's make sure we write this down. They'll be in the next time I do this session. These are the ones that I use, and this is my favorite. This used to be called Mentor Mob. You like that? Yeah, it's really good. This is now called Lesson Paths, and this is, I have every week of my graduate courses in there, and I used to gather these for teachers in my school, and basically it sequences everything. This is like your 3-ring binder, sequence learning. And I really would love to show you these things, but I can't, I'm afraid to go in. But this is what it looks like under the hood. It's collaborative, so when you're working with a team of teachers, 2nd grade, or the history department, you can collaborate, put all the newsreels together for 1942. But you can also put in there a slide deck. You can put a Google form somewhere in the middle to test for formative learning. You can do all sorts of things, and you can change the color, and you can embed it nearly everywhere. And the kids can make them too. There's nothing really unsafe in this. It's made for education. And what I had my kids do, I was the sponsor of the Gay Straight Alliance at the school, and the kids were curious about gay history, and so they wanted to know what was going on and what culture looked like. And I had them put a learning playlist together for our club meeting. And so what they did was they went to YouTube and they sequenced from the show, you may remember Soap back in the old days, through to Ellen's Coming Out, through to whatever is going on right now, which is a lot. And we had a discussion based on, kind of this historical sequence. But there's so much more you can put in here. Any slideshow, any PDF document, and you can make it, and that's absolutely free. And you can make as many as you want. Blend Space is another one that sequences learning. It creates tiles in a few forms, and you can put numbers on them. When I was going to Texas last year for a conference, and I told one of my grad students that I'd forgotten how to two-step, she created a sequence blend space for me on how to two-step with the turns coming in at the very last one, so, because that's more challenging than the regular steps, of course. And then there's Learnist. And Learnist is a very neat package. There's a lot of adult content here as well, but you can separate the stuff that you create. And I want you to think about these curations not just for the academic topics. The one on the right is from a phys ed teacher and a coach who's creating a Learnist on how to pitch better. And so this stuff can happen across school culture. One more in the learning playlist category is EdSynco. Anybody use that one? I just started using this and I'm in love with it. It's Poplet on steroids, and it allows you to just embed all sorts of media into these mind maps, and it gives you an awful lot of flexibility. And I would absolutely use this as a student product. But it's meant as a lesson builder. And then finally, in this category of the learning playlist, there's Tilde. And I would use this for steps in a science experiment, anything where there's steps, or if students have to do a how to do it project. Step 1, step 2, step 3, but into each step, you bring any media from the web. And that's Tilde. The only thing I don't like about this one is it's not embeddable. Oh, I lied, there's one more. This is Cloud School. I've played with the iBook Creator and a lot of the other ones. I'm in love with Cloud School. It is the easiest way to curate a media-rich lesson. It's just completely drag and drop. It has an elegant look to it. You can see where it says blank lesson in here. Here are all the things you can drag in, and the lessons start to take shape, and they turn into a beautiful textbook. So Cloud School is pretty cool. And one more. This one, the guy who is developing this, he's a former movie producer, and he's so excited. He wants to make this work for education, and he will do anything that I tell him to do to make this thing better. Right now, it goes on your iPad in these boards, and it sequences everything you want to show for a lesson. It's very elegant. People are using this in business for presentations. The only problem with it at this point is it can't be shared to other people. It's a personal kind of curation, but he's working on it, and he's got some big news, he says, in the next few weeks. So keep an eye on popboards. I think kids will like it when they come up and they make presentations. And then we also have an old favorite, the Book Creator for iPad. And think about that as a curation tool, because it really is. So what can you do with these things with kids? The best example that I can come up with from my own experience was we had this American history textbook that was growing really old. And I think the last president was George H.W. Bush. And so the students we didn't know what to do. Well, we knew what to do. There's a lot to study. But we tasked the kids with writing chapter 37. And we said, you can take any lens you wanted on chapter 37. It doesn't have to be homogenized like your textbook is. So some of the kids wrote it through the female perspective. Some of the kids wrote it from an African-American perspective. Other kids decided to focus on the economy or the environment. And they were tested on chapter 37. Chapter 37, across the board, was better than any other chapter ever written in our textbooks. And the kids were really proud of themselves. So they were curating their own learning paths. So let's look at a couple more dashboards. I want to emphasize that we've been talking about content, but curation is not just for content, it's also for workflow. This is my some more, and this is kind of the some more that I share with my students, but I started making it because it was my personal need. I needed to be able to get to my lesson plan portals, to get to my avatar makers, to get to my digital storytelling tools, to get to my dashboards, my tools for Twitter. And this, I just kept growing. And so I started making buttons so that it would have a kind of lovely look, and I embed it pretty much everywhere. And this is what allows me to to smash apps. It just is my tool, and my graduate students use it all the time. My friend Shannon has similar s'mores, but they're more focused. So Shannon Miller has these for various different types of work. So I think the one on the top is for keyboard. No, it's not for keyboarding, but she has one on keyboarding. She has one on coding, but she also, before she left her school, had one for every grade level. And what I liked about the way she did it way better than the way I do it. She built the toolkit with the students. So she didn't give them the whole toolkit for second grade in September. In September, she put a couple of tools, and then as the students work with them, she added to them. So the students were able to go to this address and get to these on their iPads, and they really had a lovely little dashboard for everything that they needed to do. This is Naomi Bates' dashboard, and this is a dashboard just for creating book trailers. And you can see she's organized it by color. And I know you really can't see it, but there's one on editing images. The black ones are on editing images. The red ones on editing video. The orange ones are getting stock footage for images. And then there's music. The green are music. And so on. But she's got this dashboard because what happens with kids is they just remember one tool. And what we're doing with this is we're creating options, and we're also modeling that kids can create these themselves. I'm going to skip through a couple of these. I talked about LibGuide's Live Binders is another really good one it's free, and it has a binder kind of metaphor, and when you finish creating one of these binders into which you can put any sort of content, then you can embed these things as little books pretty much anywhere. When you think about S'more and programs like S'more and TAC, these are wonderful ways to create modular posters. Basically, you're dragging all sorts of things in to create one vertical poster. I'll show you one I did, but the one that I want to talk about that Shannon did was this one that she did for the Christmas holiday. Has anybody seen this one before? Okay. What she did was she did this 12 days of Christmas or any holiday, any winter break, and she gave the students for every day an activity. And these are all different things that she smashed together. So that she comes on as the librarian in this telegami video describing the first activity. And then there's all sorts of different media that she's put from the first day to the 12th day. And if I were a parent, I'd go crazy about this curated holiday packet. So I kind of love that. For me, what I've put together for my high school students was this copyright-friendly toolkit, and it curated all of the videos I needed. This is a lesson, so it curated all the videos I needed, and I know Jane and her team were talking about this in a session earlier, but it did fair use, copyright, Creative Commons, CC0, and public domain, but it had the best video, so it really became just an instructional tool that was completely curated, and I keep adding to it as I learn more. Michelle Ludula, who is also a good friend, uses Pearl trees. So each of her EdWeb webinars is curated in a Pearl tree. In turn, all of her Pearl trees are curated in one big Pearl tree. So all you need to do to go to Michelle's three-year body of work is to go to her Pearl trees. You can visit every webinar and see every tool that was ever talked about. This is just a closer look. And people are collecting on Pearl trees. This is CSLA and stuff on steampunk. Yay. Okay. Think about how many of you are ThingLink users? Okay, the people in the front. With ThingLink, it creates interactive posters, so you can hyperlink anything to a poster. So what I did was I wanted to show in that subscription databases what each state had in subscription databases. So each dot links to each state's offering in subscription databases. But you can put a map up there and curate content around Paris. What is it that you want your students to know about Paris? And any kind of content that is that can be accessed through a link can be curated onto one of these posters. One of the things I do with this is curate the evaluation my students used to do on infographics, because infographics are, of course, highly constructed media messages. So I had them bring in credibility measures for each of the elements on an infographic. And, okay, this is just an example of the State Library from California. I just wanted to emphasize it. All right. Okay, let me move on. And then there's Adam Bellows' EduClipper, which is like Pinterest for kids. And it also has a great portfolio tool. So this is absolutely COPPA compliant, and kids can use it like crazy. Another genre is the gallery. I use YouTube as my gallery. These are videos I'm curating for my class that are based on interviews with great search experts, and so that's a gallery in YouTube. But Weston High School, for instance, has a Pinterest gallery. Each of these boards is a genre of books, and each of the books in each of these boards links to a Goodreads review. And so the students come in with these on their iPad, they walk around the shelves, and they go to directly to the shelves and find the books that they most want. These are often based on teacher assignments. Similarly, ASCD uses Pinterest for much of their books and a lot of their instructional content, including webinars. And I sent my students to look for anchor charts as examples, and they went crazy about how many people are curating boards on anchor charts. Anchor charts are really helpful. And I also sent my students to curate content that they find inspiring relating to design. So if you're looking for classroom design ideas, I would gather it on a Pinterest and then share it with my administrators so they could see exactly what I'm thinking about. The other thing I used Pinterest for at the high school level was I had the kids pin local news. Nobody was doing that. Our local newspaper was seeing one element of news in our community, but they weren't seeing the church interest stuff. They weren't seeing the stuff that was going on in the various different clubs in the school. Think about all the stuff that's not covered by your local newspapers and how you could send your kids out to curate the local news. The Digital Public Library of America, it's amazing to me how Pinterest is being used by these major organizations and associations. It's the Audubon Society, for instance. It's just so many people are using Pinterest, and I don't see why we don't use it. I create reading lists in Pinterest. So when my students have to choose a book for my social media class, they never jumped on choosing a book as quickly as when they saw them gathered together with their covers on Pinterest, and they signed up for them right away. Another genre of these is the select and rank genre. My favorite one of those is Listly. Any users of Listly? Yeah. What do you use it for? Oh, that's it. I don't want to put you on the spot. Okay, so you're collecting reading sites. So the other feature of this is we used it recently at an ed camp where instead of people voting with dots on which sessions they wanted to have, people would pitch their session, add something to the Listly, and then there's a thumbs up, thumbs down feature where you can move the things up. So immediately we were able to see the most popular sessions. So kids can actually link to their projects on a Listly. That's a little dangerous, isn't it? Voting for your favorites. But it's a way to kind of sort and prioritize things. So it works for curation even if you're not doing that. You can turn off the sort feature. And this is, Naomi Bates uses it a lot. She does top 10 lists. This is 100 health websites you can trust. And I put on there my top 10 lists of top 10 lists. It's a bit meta. And this is Naomi Bates. She has her top editing tools, top music sites, and people can vote on them, but she's kind of prioritized them. Another way to curate is in timelines. Storify is a way to create a timeline and to amplify the message. And I'm not storifying this event, but I've storified other events. And basically, this is a tool that's used by journalists as well as ordinary people like us. Back to Hurricane Sandy. Hurricane Sandy was a period where people were storifying like crazy, bringing the news in, bringing all sorts of media together, and creating these lovely little stories. This was a story about my visit to AASL in Columbus, and it's my personal take. It's the stuff that I thought was important. So I pulled in the tweets, the YouTube videos, the Flickr stuff, the Instagram stuff, anything that I thought was important. And when I visited Doha a few years back, I was doing the same thing. And honestly, that memory is lovely in that Storify, and it tells a story in a way that my Google Pics, my Google Photos don't, and also my Flickr albums don't. There's a lot of icky stuff on Dippity, but give it a try if you want to create a timeline with probably older students. Again, it's a really lovely way to curate content in a linear, timeline-y kind of way. And a couple of new ones. Adobe Slate is another interesting way to kind of gather things together in a kind of website, that kind of vertical website way. And it has a very professional feel to it. Similarly, Microsoft has a program that does something that looks very much like Slate, and it's called Sway. Both are free. And I think this is my last category, and then we can do some questions and some thinking together. You can curate portfolios as well. If you haven't seen Seesaw yet on the elementary level, any lovers of Seesaw here? It's pretty good, right? Yeah, you're curating student work. So what's beautiful about this, especially if you have tablets or iPads, kids take pictures of what they're doing. You set up the class. They immediately find their avatar. They send the picture to the avatar, and you've got a curated album, portfolio of their work. You can also, parents can opt to get into it and see it, so they can, and they can, anything that is digital you can put in there, and they can reflect on their work too. So it's not just the stuff. They can either do a text reflection or click one button and do an audio reflection. It's possible now for a student to look back at an entire elementary career through a tool like Seesaw. There's another gallery tool that I love called Creatables, and this is for your student artist. Student artists can put their work up. You can create a class account for Creatables, and you can share art with other students all over the world. It's moderated, it's beautiful, and very often there's a prompt, an international prompt for students to respond visually to a question. And this is another one of the ones that won Best Apps from the ASL team, and it's called Easy Portfolio. It's kind of the older version of Seesaw. And as I mentioned, Adam Bellow's EduClipper has a portfolio feature. I think what's really important in all of this is that your phone is a camera and your phone is a scanner. So I use Scannable. There's probably 20 other really good free scanning programs out there. But what you're doing is curating the culture of your classroom, your library, your school. And you lose opportunities when you forget to take that visual curation. And so what I would do is assign a weekly photographer or scanner of the stuff that's going on, and have them, give them the Flickr account or give them whatever it is that you're saving to, and make them the archivist. So I would argue that it is the perfect time to contribute, model, and lead through curation. You can make a difference through curation. Are there issues relating to curation? Yes, there are issues. And Kristen Swanson, who lives in California now, I don't know if she's here, but she's a friend of mine who confessed about being a digital hoarder, and I feel like I'm much the same. I collect too much, and I leave my footprints in all of these curation sites, and I don't curate in all these places because I think that would be tragic, don't you? I think also we have to be honest when we're curating. As we gather this stuff together, there is the tendency to forget where the original stuff came from and not to credit the originator. And so a number of artists a few years back started taking all their work off Pinterest. because they found their original photography was being gathered by others, and the credit was being lost. And so that's a danger. And when we teach kids about curation, I think we need to emphasize that. Another thing about curation that I find myself getting engaged in is I don't always see the whole picture. Remember I talked about ungluing newspapers? I don't see every side of the newspaper anymore. And I follow curators who think like me and who are interested in the same stuff. And so there's a bit of a filter bubble in this curation nation, just as there is on the web. Ross Hudgens put together this good versus bad curation model. It's not just a cut and paste activity. We need to transform, we need to credit, we need to go to many sources, we need to honor. So I hope that I've inspired you in some way, I'm ending early, to create, make meaning, solve problems for your community. This is a little book, it's available free, that I interviewed curators all over the place, including my hero, Robin Good. And I'll play you the finale, if that's okay. Okay.
Curator, curator, build me a mash. Gather the feeds so I can cash. Media, blog posts, and tweets that make sense. And mix me a perfect match. Curator, curator, so much to read. Google exhausts me with more than I need. I'm seeking relevance, so I must plead. Let human touch intercede. For teacher, let it be scholarly me well. I want the feast to keep me current with fashion or causes for which I can take the lead. Curator, curator, give me new tools so I can learn curating rules. Live binder, storify, scoop it, and squirrel. So many new research tools. So please, please make it dynamic. I don't need the same old rehash. I rely on your knowledge and passion to open the newsfeed sash. Curator, curator, demonstrate MASH. Use networking skills to help us in school. Through you we discover the big picture view to manage new info search tools.
Thank you. What's that? I will. There's the words. Yeah, I miss my high school a lot. It was a school that was much like Glee. It was a small school, and I'd say, let's put on a musical, and they'd say, okay. And the next day we would be working on lyrics in a Google Doc and going through the theater department's costume racks, and then the video team would come up and say, are you ready yet? And it was pretty fabulous. I'll show you some more tomorrow. But so I really feel like I didn't have the energy going up here. So tell me what else you'd like to know, and what are you thinking? Yeah, well, there's another one called History Pin, which I think you can use for that. And then there's Google has a tool that you can use with that too. Somebody tell me the name. Is it just Google Maps? You can put little things on. I think there's an element of the personal in there, what you think looks best, but it is about the affordance. That's why I tried to put these things into these categories, because I wanted to make some sense of them. First of all, you have to deal with what grade are you working with, and then you're limited by that, of course. But not all of them do all those things very well. I mean, current awareness, I'd pick one, and I landed on Scoop It because it had more features. And also, trial and error, Jane. I've made so many mistakes. With Paperly, one tip is the default is for Paperly to include in every newspaper your Twitter feed. And when the kids started publishing their newspapers, I not only got their stuff on the subject they were interested in, I got their entire Twitter feed. coming up in the morning, and they panicked first. So again, that was a lesson. We had to go under the hood and turn that off, because you can tweak all of these things. Yeah, but you're right. It is overwhelming, and you don't need that many of them. I'm just giving you, I'm being your librarian today, your curation librarian today. So any other questions or thoughts? No, I hope this was okay. Good? You're all right. You're welcome. You're welcome.